Now, they had a lot, they didn't invent the U.S. Constitution from whole cloth. They were great, great students of history. The framers said, history is the lamp of experience. And that's what it is. Think about what is history. It's a record of human experience in time. And the framers were extremely well educated and had studied extensively the various political constitutions from Athens through Rome, all through the modern Western development of Western society and so forth. And they looked for things that worked and things that didn't work. So they put together this inherited wisdom that had been accumulated over centuries and centuries. And they also added new insights to it and put it together in a creative way that also did something new in the world. And they established the U.S. Constitution, which is not a perfect document, but they didn't expect it to be perfect. They recognized that they themselves were not perfect, and that experience might show us that things might need to be amended or changed. But they did intend for the Constitution to be a permanent document. They thought they were ushering in the Novus Ordem Seclorum, a new order for the ages, which they intended the U.S. In intention, the Constitution was fixed and perpetual. But again, they recognized that they were not perfect. Experience might show some errors, things needed to be changed. And so they allowed within the Constitution for a process of amending it. It's not easy, but it's possible. If there are problems with the Constitution as originally written, it can be amended. But that requires very, very high majority. 75% of the American people have to express a desire to amend the Constitution. So it's possible to change it, but they deliberately made it very difficult because they intended the Constitution to be perpetual and unchangeable. The word they used was fixed. Sam Adams again says, in all free states, the Constitution is fixed. Now we'll get back to talking about what that is, but let me just mention another aspect of this relationship between human nature and the particular kind of constitution the framers created. Plato, as many of you probably know, and as we've mentioned, is usually considered the first political philosopher in history. Plato is operating several centuries before Christ in ancient Greece, and he wrote his most famous work, The Republic, which is considered the first text in political philosophy, asking this fundamental question: what is justice? What is the best regime? How should we organize our political life together? The word political comes from the Greek word polis, right? You can see the larger organization and so forth. But the Greeks were living many centuries before Christ. And as we mentioned, I think earlier, and which we will come back to explore later, in the pre-Christian world, they had not yet made a distinction between religion and government. They were the same in the mind of Plato and Aristotle and all Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Rome. It's hard for us to grasp that because we come from a very different tradition. But the religion and government were the same thing. So Plato introduces this concept that's still with us today, that's sometimes paraphrased as the concept of, quote, statecraft as soulcraft. Statecraft as soulcraft. What does that mean? Statecraft refers to simply using governmental laws and legislation, right, to achieve a purpose. That's statecraft, right? You're learning how to make laws and legislation to produce a certain result. Soulcraft, of course, we would call that spiritual formation, right? Religious education, religious training, immersion in the Bible, with the aim of the spiritual formation of a person, usually younger, but also it can be at any age. So this concept of statecraft as soulcraft raises the question of, should government, law and legislation be used to shape the spiritual formation of a people? Sometimes Americans rephrase that in a casual way. Like we say things like, should government legislate morality? Is government responsible for making men good? Should government officials deliberately try to craft laws and legislation to make people better spiritually? That's the question. Now, Plato says, yes, government should. He's a proponent of statecraft as soulcraft, that the laws should not only produce order, but they should also strive to make men good. Now, this made sense in the pre-Christian classical world of ancient Greece, because as I said, Plato was thinking of law and government and religion as all the same thing. So he's thinking of the polis as something like a church. So in his worldview, it makes sense that you would want to use laws to make men good, because laws served as a sort of religious education for the people. But that was hundreds of years before Christ. An entirely different tradition, revolutionary actually, arises from the Christian revelation and Christ's distinction to render unto God that which belongs to God, and unto Caesar that which belongs to Caesar. Christianity introduces a revolutionary new principle into human society. The idea was that henceforth, in Christian society, the early church fathers held it as an essential part of Christian faith that never again could religion and government be united in the same entity. It opened up this idea that there is a dimension, a spiritual dimension of life that is reserved to God and the church. And there is a political dimension of life that is reserved to the secular rulers, God and Caesar. Now, we don't call that today in our society. We call it instead, what? You've guessed, separation of church and state. This is a Christian idea, and it prevails only in Christianized societies. No other civilization in the world has anything like it. But it's of overpowering significance, and in fact, some scholars have said it's the single most important contribution of Christianity to the development of the free society. But back to this concept we're exploring now, statecraft as soulcraft. I ask you, what would the framers think about this Platonic idea that government should strive to make men good, that government should legislate morality, that government should be involved in the spiritual formation of the people? And this is one instance where I really wish that we were in class together, because I really would like to hear your responses to this. But I guess I'm going to have to just tell you the answer. The answer was that they would have overwhelmingly rejected that concept. And why? It's not that they didn't want people to be good or that they didn't believe people should have spiritual formation. In fact, we saw it was crucial. But is government the agent to do that? Is government qualified to engage in the spiritual formation of a people? No. They are just men. They're not angels. They are just like you and me. And having the ability to get elected to an office in no way qualifies you to be a spiritual authority of any kind. They would never in a million years have dreamed of thinking that government should be involved in spiritual and moral formation. But we need to be a morally formed people, so who does that? Where's that come from? Well, it comes from religion. It comes from the churches. This is why they wanted and did everything they could to support strong religious establishments, strong religious churches. Again, the reasoning, for most people, it's religion that shapes their morality. And you must have a moral people to have a free society, and so therefore, religion is crucial to the free society. But government has no role in this, because government is, when we're voting for somebody, we're not electing ministers or the Pope. These people have very different tasks, keeping secular order according to the U.S. Constitution, not enforcing the Bible, right? So framers would reject completely this idea of statecraft as soulcraft. They want us to be a virtuous people, but that doesn't come from government. In fact, we have to be a virtuous people before we can establish a free government. Government doesn't create virtuous people, but a virtuous people are the only ones capable of establishing and preserving a free government. So let's stop for a minute here, and I'll come back and then briefly describe to you the constitutional mechanisms that the framers put in place in order to ensure that the American government would be limited. Okay, so I'll take a little break, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, thank you.